Do you own too much of your employer's company stock? I'm Michelle Smallenberger, a financial advisor here at Financial Design Studio, and that's exactly what we're going to answer today. So corporate executives today own a lot more of their employer stock than they did 20 years ago. And there's a lot of reasons for that, which we'll touch on. So in this video, I want to be sure that we're going to talk about three things. So first, we're going to talk about the ways that you can own your employer stock, and then how to calculate how much of your employer stock you actually own. And then finally, do you have too much? Now, if you're curious about this, we do have an article on our website at financialdesignstudio.com. So you can check that out, or it's in the resources below this video. So let's just break out the way that you can own your employer stock. There's really four kind of main buckets that you can own them in. So first, one of the ways is through stock options. Now, this may be incentive stock options or non-qualified stock options. So there's really these two different, and this just depends on what you're given. But those are the two different ways. This is stock that's given to you for a reason, or for maybe it could be a bonus, or it could be an incentive to sign on with the company to come work for them. So it can be given for different reasons. But they give you this stock and they say, okay, as long as you work here for another year, 2 years, 7 years, then you can finally earn it. So it's finally vested and now it's yours. So that's really the first way that you can own employer stock. A second way, which has become a lot more popular over the years, is restricted stock units. So another way that you may hear about these is just RSUs, very simply by their initials. And these two ways are company stock that your employer has given you, and they've said after this certain point, now it's vested and it's yours. So both of these function in that way. Now, the third way that you can own your employer stock is through an ESPP, or an employer stock purchase plan. And this way of purchasing your employer stock is you saying, I'm now going to use my money and buy employer stock. So I'm going to buy shares in this company that I work for. The reason that people like to do this is because usually there's a discount. So it may be 10 to 15%, where if you purchase the shares, you're getting a 10 to 15% discount on the price. So you're buying it for less than it's actually worth. So right away, you're getting a 10 to 15% return just by purchasing the stock at a discount. So it is a very beneficial way to build wealth. The last way that people can own employer stock is even in your 401k. So for example, we all know we can put money into a 401k for retirement, and that's set aside and it's growing for the future. Well, in this 401k, you can now choose the investments that you own. And typically that might be mutual funds or exchange traded funds. So different choices that you have. But some employers actually allow you the ability to own their company stock in your 401k as well. So now you're buying shares of this individual stock as well. So we can see there's 4 different ways that you can buy your employer stock, all the while owning more and more, which really is putting more and more risk in your portfolio in this one company if something happens. Now, one of the things that's interesting with these 4 different ways you can own stock is that the first 2, stock options and RSUs, are actually what we call non-voluntary ways of owning the stock. So this just means that you didn't necessarily decide, I want to get an incentive stock option for this many shares, and after 2 years it'll be mine. Or I want to get this many restricted stock units, and after that time it's going to be mine. This was something that was non-voluntary. The company gave you, they said, we're going to give you these shares for this reason, and over this time period they'll vest. So that is what we mean by non-voluntary. Now, these bottom 2 are actually what we call voluntary. This probably makes sense because now, as you've heard of what they are, an ESPP, you're choosing to take your own money and buy more company stock. And then also with the 401k, you're taking money you've put into your 401k and you're saying, instead of buying an S&P 500 fund or another mutual fund I could choose from, I'm going to choose my employer stock to purchase. Now, when we talk about calculating how much stock you actually own, let's break that down a little bit. So first, what we're going to do is we're going to list out the ways that you own it. And we're really going to add everything up that you own in your employer stock to calculate this. So first, you're going to look for any of your stock, and this could be in like a brokerage or an investment account. You're going to look for any of your employer stock shares in that. and you're going to write down that total that you own of that stock. And then next, you're actually going to say, okay, how much of the money in my 401k do I own in my employer stock? So the 401k employer stock, now you only want to take that portion that's invested in the stock. So let's say your 401k has $100,000 in it total, and you own 20,000 of your company stock in the stock. You're only going to put 20,000 in this equation. So not the full value of the 401k, just the employer stock portion for this piece. Then you want to add in any of these RSUs or any of these stocks, so these options, you're going to add, but you're only going to add the vested portion. So only the vested portion. So for example, they may have given you restricted stock units of 500 shares, but only 100 of them are actually vested today. That means that 100 is something you can actually do something with. The other 400 are not vested yet, so they're not technically yours. So we're only including the vested portion in this calculation. And then you want to add in the shares or the total number of your employer stock in that ESPP. So those shares that you could buy at a discount, you want to add those in here too. So really we're adding up all of the employer stock that we own. And once we add all of that together, we're going to have a total of your employer stock. So now once we have this total, we know this is the value of everything I own in my employer. Then we're going to take that amount and we're going to divide it by your total portfolio value. So this is now everything that you own in your 401k. This total portfolio value, this is the whole 401k. This is your whole brokerage account, all of the ESPP, all of those pieces. That's now what you want to include in there. You're going to divide that employer stock by the total portfolio value. And now you're going to get the percentage of what you own. So let's say it's 10%, or that might be 50%. At this point, now it's really helpful because we can see how much do we own only in our employer stock. And this is really important because when we talk about how much should we have, this is where now that we know, we can actually start to evaluate. Now, we have a rule of thumb where we really like corporate executives to keep 10% or less of their portfolio in their company stock. And that's really just to limit that risk, like we talked about in the beginning, where you have your income, your benefits, and now all of this employer stock, these awards that you're getting. We don't want, if something were to happen, like Enron, which is a really major example, but employees who had everything in their employer stock, who had their income, everything went away overnight because everything was in that company. This is what we're trying to avoid. So especially as you're getting closer to retirement, this is something you really want to be careful of. Now you want to start thinking about, how can I diversify this away? What can I do? And in that article that I mentioned in the beginning, this is something that we cover, is how you can diversify away from your employer stock. So if you're a corporate executive, I hope this is helpful to understand the difference of your employer stock with your whole portfolio. And if we can be helpful, this is what we love to do. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.